Sophie had access to $1,340,000 in our joint operating account and 14 months to decide what to do with it. What she did was route our vendor rebates to herself while I ran the floor. I am Clara. Sophie is my older sister. We grew up sharing a bedroom in a small house outside Cincinnati, with parents who worked too many hours and a kitchen table that had a wobble in one leg our dad never got around to fixing. Sophie was the one who told the stories at that table. I was the one who said it. That was the shape of things from the beginning. She talked. I tracked. She made the introductions. I made the lists. When we opened our boutique together 3 years ago, we joked that it was the same arrangement, just with better lighting. Equal partners on paper, 50-50, one operating account, one brand name we had argued over for a week and finally agreed on at 2 in the morning, eating cold pizza on the floor of an empty storefront. I kept a folder from day one, a real folder, the kind with a spine and a label, sitting on the second shelf of my office in the Cincinnati store. Every vendor invoice we ever received in order, by date, by SKU. Sophie used to laugh at it. She called it my family ledger because I had started it the same way our mother used to keep her grocery receipts in an envelope by the toaster. I never minded the joke. I figured one of us had to keep the receipts. I did not know until much later that I was the only one who was. There was a moment near the end when my attorney read a dissolution confirmation number into a phone while my sister was standing in our Columbus store. She asked him twice whether there was any account left to divide. I want to tell you how we got there. But first I have to tell you about a price quote and a supplier in Indiana who answered his own phone on a Tuesday afternoon and the 18 cents that ended 14 months of pretending I did not see what I was seeing. If you have ever been the one who carried the family burden while someone else took the credit, stay with me. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, because family truth has a way of coming back. Our parents worked at the same plant for 26 years. Different shifts. They saw each other on Sundays and at dinner, and in the small fights they had about money in the front room when they thought we were asleep. We were not asleep. Sophie and I would sit at the top of the stairs in our nightgowns and listen. Sophie was 4 years older. She was the pretty one, in the way little towns decide who is pretty. Teachers liked her. Our father liked her. She had a way of walking into a room and making it about her without saying a word, and I learned early that the easiest way to live in the same house with her was to take whatever role she did not want. She did not want chores, so I did chores. She did not want to count the change in the jar on top of the refrigerator, so I counted it. She did not want to be the one who drove our mother to her physical therapy appointments after the fall in 2009, so I drove her. I am not telling you this to make Sophie sound like a villain in a children's book. She was not. She loved our parents. She loved me in her way. But there was a pattern in her from the time we were small where she always assumed someone else was handling the part she did not feel like handling. And for most of our lives, that someone was me. When we decided to start the business in the fall of 2018, we sat at our parents' kitchen table to talk about it. The same table, the same wobble. Our mother had passed by then. Our father was thinner, quieter, mostly watching baseball with the sound turned down. He listened to us talk about the boutique with his hands folded on the placemat, and when we were done, he said only one thing. Make sure you both sign the same paper. I thought he meant the lease. I thought he meant the LLC papers. I did not understand at the time that he meant something larger, something he had watched between his own brother and himself 60 years before that he had never quite gotten over. We did sign the same paper. We were equal owners, 50-50. We opened the Cincinnati store first in the spring of 2019 in a corner space with good light and a bad heating system. Sophie picked the paint. I picked the inventory software. She walked the floor and charmed the customers and gave the brand its voice. I did the books, the schedules, the vendor calls, the receiving, the back room. We made it work. By the end of the second year, we had cleared enough to open a second store in Columbus, and that was where the trouble started, although I did not know it yet. The Columbus lease was Sophie's project. She found the location. She negotiated the rent. She wanted that store to be hers in a way the Cincinnati store somehow was both of ours. I let her have it. That was the same old arrangement. She wanted the front. I would handle the back. same as the kitchen table, same as our mother's appointments. The first red flag came in early 2021, about a year before everything came apart. Sophie sent a casual message to our two main suppliers, a knitwear vendor out of North Carolina and a small batch leather goods maker in southern Indiana, asking them to send all future invoices to her personal email address instead of our shared business inbox. Just to keep things organized, she wrote. She copied me on the message, the way you copy someone on a thing you have already decided. For 3 years, vendor invoices had come into a shared inbox we both monitored. I saw every confirmation. I matched every line item to every purchase order. It was how I had run the back office since the first week. And in one casual message, sent on a Tuesday afternoon in March, she removed me from the confirmation chain. I remember reading that email at the small desk in the Cincinnati back room, with a mug of coffee going cold next to my elbow, and feeling something I could not name yet. Not suspicion. More like the way you feel when someone moves a piece of furniture in a room you have lived in for a long time, and you cannot tell at first what is different, only that the air has changed. I did not push back. I should have. That was the first time I saw the old pattern in a new form. I told myself she was right. I told myself it was just an organizational thing. I told myself a lot of things in 2021 that I would later have to take back. For the next 8 months, the invoices came to her email. She forwarded the totals to me in clean monthly summaries, like a manager updating a stakeholder. The summaries always matched the bank withdrawals. The bank withdrawals always cleared the operating account. On paper, in her version of the paper, everything was fine. But I had not stopped keeping my folder. That was the part she did not know. When the invoices stopped coming to the shared inbox, I started calling the vendors directly to confirm the orders. Not because I suspected her, because that was simply how I had always done it. Old habit. The kind of habit a back office sister builds because nobody told her not to. In November of 2021, I called the leather goods maker in southern Indiana about a reorder of a small crossbody bag we had been carrying since the second store opened. His name was Daniel. He was a quiet man in his 60s who ran the operation with his son. I had spoken with him maybe 40 times by then. He picked up on the second ring. I asked him to confirm the unit price on the next run. He told me. I wrote the number down on a yellow legal pad I kept on the corner of my desk. $12.42 per unit. Then I pulled out my folder, the family ledger, as Sophie used to call it. I flipped through the invoices for that exact SKU, going back 8 months. Every invoice she had submitted listed the unit price at $12.60, 18 cents. You would not think 18 cents could end a business. You would not think 18 cents could end a family. I sat at that desk for a long time, looking at the legal pad and the folder, and I did not call her. I did not call our father. I did not even close the folder. I did one thing. I made a note of the SKU, the date, the volume, and the spread. Then I put the folder back on the second shelf, and I went out to the floor and I helped a customer find a sweater in her size, and I smiled, and I rang her up, and I told her to come back at Christmas. The receipt had my name on it. The story had hers. I did not move on the 18 cents that day. I did not even move on it that month. I had been a back office sister for too long to act on a single data point. What I did was open a small spreadsheet on my home laptop, the one Sophie did not have access to, and I started rebuilding the vendor invoice file from scratch. Every SKU, every unit price, every quantity, every date, every supplier of record. I called other suppliers. I asked them to confirm prices. Quietly, casually, like an owner doing an annual check. Most of them confirmed prices that matched our books. But the two big ones, Daniel's leather operation and the knitwear vendor in North Carolina, had a consistent gap. Sometimes 18 cents, sometimes 31 cents, sometimes more on higher-priced SKUs, always in the same direction, always against us. I did the math on a Sunday morning in January of 2022, sitting on the floor of my apartment in front of a low coffee table, with the folder open on one side and my laptop on the other. I cross-referenced 14 months of orders. The gap, applied across our purchase volume, came out to a number I am still careful about saying out loud because numbers do not feel like the point. The point was the pattern. The pattern was that she had been routing rebates to herself. Some siblings do not want fairness. They want revision. There was a second moment, a few weeks before, that I had not been able to make sense of at the time. Now I could. In late October, I had been running our third quarter reconciliation in the back office at the Cincinnati store. I was matching bank line items to the general ledger the way I always did at the end of a quarter. There was a withdrawal, dated in early September, for $14,000. The line item was coded as vendor relations. There was no contract attached in our shared drive. There was no signatory on the corresponding internal memo. The payee on the withdrawal was a name I did not recognize. I had stared at that line for a long time on the day I found it. I had even sent Sophie a short message about it. She had written back with a sentence about a one-time consulting fee for a buyer she had been working with on the spring line. I had not pushed. I had not pushed because she was my sister, because the kitchen table was still in the back of my mind. Because if I started questioning her, I would be questioning 38 years of letting her have the front of the room. The $14,000 line did not connect to a real vendor. I confirmed that in February, after I had finished the spreadsheet, when I made a quiet call to a forensic accountant my attorney recommended. He looked at the line and at 6 others I had flagged. He did not say much. He said only that the pattern was consistent. The word he used was layered. There were the rebates, routed through a parallel arrangement at the 2 suppliers. There were the side payments, coded as vendor relations, going to a payee whose registered address turned out to be a small office park outside Columbus. The records arrived in a brown accordion folder on my kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning in late February. I remember pouring coffee into a mug with our parents' anniversary date on it. The mug had been my mother's, and our father had given it to me after she passed, and standing at the counter for a long time without drinking it. I did not argue about memory. I brought records. That was the line I kept saying to myself in the kitchen as I stood there. I had spent 38 years arguing about memory with my sister, about who had really driven our mother to physical therapy, about who had really cleaned out the house after our father moved into the smaller place, about who had really stayed up all night with our mother in the last week. Sophie's version of those nights and mine had never quite matched, and every time I had tried to say so, the conversation had turned into something about my tone or my mood or how I was always making things into a competition. This was not memory. This was an invoice file. This was a date. This was an SKU. This was a price quoted by a man named Daniel who had no reason to lie to me about a unit cost on a Tuesday afternoon. There was a silence around all of it for about 2 weeks. I did not tell her. I did not confront her. I sat with the folder. I sat with the records. I sat with the part of me that still wanted to be the back office sister, who would find a quiet way to fix this without anyone losing anything. I tried, for those 2 weeks, to imagine a version where I called her and we sat down at a table and I showed her the spreadsheet and she looked at it and said the words that would have made any of this survivable. I am sorry. I did not think you would notice. I did not mean it to grow this big. I will pay it back. We will fix it. I knew, even while I was imagining it, that she would not say any of those things. I knew because I had watched her do this her entire life, on smaller things, with smaller stakes. The time she took our grandmother's pearl necklace out of our mother's jewelry box, 3 weeks after the funeral, and told me later that our mother had wanted her to have it. There was no note. There was no will provision. There was just Sophie, with the necklace, telling me what our mother had wanted. Some siblings do not want fairness. They want revision. I made the decision on a Thursday night, in the second week of February, while I was sitting on my couch with the folder open on the coffee table. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Marcus. He had handled our LLC paperwork from the beginning. He knew Sophie. He had been at the soft opening of the Cincinnati store. He had eaten one of the small chocolate cakes she had ordered from a bakery on Vine Street, and he had told her the cake was the best part of the night. He had liked her. When I walked him through the spreadsheet on a Friday afternoon in his small office on the 14th floor of a building downtown, he did not say much for a long time. He asked clarifying questions. He took notes on a yellow pad. He looked at the legal pad I had brought, the original one with Daniel's price written on it in November. At one point, he took off his glasses, set them down on his desk, and looked at me. and asked the question I had been afraid he would ask. Do you want to confront her or do you want to dissolve? I did not answer for a long time. Confrontation was the version where I sat across from her at our kitchen table, the same table our father had warned us about, and I showed her the folder and we tried to find a way through. Dissolution was the version where I closed the door. I told him I wanted to dissolve. I told him I wanted to keep the brand. I told him I wanted the customer list, the social media accounts, and the name we had argued over at 2 a.m. on a pizza-stained floor. He asked me what I wanted to do about the Columbus lease. I said she could keep it. I meant it. The Columbus store had always been hers in the way she had wanted things to be hers. She could keep the building. She could keep the rent payments. She could keep the vendor debts that the side deal arrangements had quietly accumulated against the operation, the ones that would surface as soon as we filed. She had wanted the front of the room. She could have the front of the room. The dissolution paperwork was filed on a Wednesday morning in late February of 2022. I sat in Marcus's office while he walked through the documents with me. I signed in 12 places. The IP transfer was filed the same day, a clean assignment of the brand name, the social media accounts, and the customer list to a new entity solely in my name. I had set the new entity up 2 weeks earlier, quietly, without telling anyone, including my own bookkeeper. I want to be honest with you. Filing those papers did not feel like winning anything. It felt like closing a door on a room that had been open my whole life. When the dissolution confirmation number came back from the state, Marcus called me first. Then he asked me how I wanted to handle telling Sophie. I told him I did not want to be on the call. I had been on every call with my sister for 38 years. I wanted, for once, not to be the one carrying the conversation. He called her at the Columbus store on a Thursday afternoon around 2 o'clock. I know the time because I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop in Cincinnati with the engine off, and I was watching the clock on the dashboard. I was not going to listen to the call. I just wanted to know when it was happening. Marcus told me later what was said. He kept it short because that was what I had asked him to do. He told her the dissolution had been filed. He gave her the confirmation number. He told her the IP assets had been transferred to a separate entity. He told her the Columbus lease and the outstanding vendor obligations remained with the dissolved company and therefore with her as the operating principal at that location. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question I had known she would ask. She asked whether there was any account left to divide. He told her the operating account had been closed as part of the dissolution, and that all remaining funds had been allocated according to the documented contributions, the rebate findings, and the outstanding vendor liabilities. He told her the final allocation report would be sent to her attorney by the end of the week. She asked again. She asked if there was anything left in the joint account. He told her there was not. I want to tell you that I felt something at that moment. I want to tell you that I felt the kind of feeling you see in movies, where the wronged sister stands at a window and watches a sunset and feels a quiet kind of justice settle over her. I did not feel that. I felt tired. I felt the kind of tired that goes back to a house outside Cincinnati and a kitchen table with a wobble in one leg and a mother who worked the second shift and a father who said one sentence about a piece of paper and a sister who had always assumed somebody else was watching the count on the change jar. The caregiver's log was dated. The lies were not. She called me the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let it go. On the third call, I picked up. She did not yell. That was not her style. She had never been a yeller. She was a reframer. She started, on that call, doing what she had always done, which was telling me a story about what had happened that did not match what had happened. She told me she had been planning to talk to me about the rebate arrangements. She told me they had been a temporary measure. She told me she had been going to roll them back into the operating account by the end of the year. She told me the $14,000 line was for a buyer who had not yet billed her properly. She told me I had blindsided her. She told me she did not understand how I could have done this without giving her a chance. I listened. I did not interrupt. I let her finish. When she was done, I said one thing. I have the invoice file, Sophie. I have the price quotes from the suppliers. I have the call log. I have the spreadsheet. The numbers are the numbers. She was quiet for a long time on the other end. I could hear in the background the low hum of the Columbus store, the music we had picked together for the spring playlist, a customer asking somebody where the dressing rooms were. She said finally that she wished I had come to her first. I told her I had come to her in 100 small ways for 38 years. I told her that the kitchen table conversations, the change jar, the physical therapy appointments, the necklace, the casual reorganizations of who was on which email, those had been the coming. She had not heard any of them. This time I had not come to her. This time I had come with records. We did not speak for the next 4 months. In June of 2022, our father had a small stroke. He recovered mostly. Sophie and I were in the same hospital room for the first time since the call. We did not look at each other for the first hour. We sat on opposite sides of his bed. He held my hand on one side and hers on the other. And at one point, he opened his eyes and looked at both of us. And he said very softly, "Your mother always told me to make sure you both signed the same paper." He went back to sleep. Sophie cried quietly into the sleeve of her sweater. I did not cry. I had done my crying the previous February, alone in my apartment, with the folder on the coffee table. When we left the hospital that night, we walked out to the parking lot together. She asked me if I would ever forgive her. I told her I did not know. I told her I was not ready to talk about forgiveness. I told her I was still grieving the version of her I had grown up believing in. She nodded. She did not argue. That was the closest she had ever come in our entire lives to letting a story end without rewriting it. The Columbus store closed that fall. The vendor debts caught up with her. She moved out of the apartment she had been renting downtown and went to live with our father for a while to help him through his recovery. I think in some quiet way that was good for both of them. I do not know if it was good for her in the way she needed. I am not sure anymore that I am the right person to know that. The Cincinnati store, under the new entity, is still open. The brand name is still ours. Or I should say, it is mine now. The customer list is intact. The social media accounts are intact. Daniel still ships us crossbody bags out of southern Indiana, and his unit price is still $12.42, and every invoice he sends comes into a shared inbox that my new bookkeeper and I both monitor. I keep the folder on the second shelf, the same one I have always kept, the original one, the family ledger. I added a new section in the back in February of 2022 with all the documents from the dissolution, the confirmation number, the IP transfer, the forensic accountant's report, Marcus's notes from the call. I do not look at that section often, but I know it is there. Sometimes on a Sunday morning, when the store is closed and the street outside is quiet, I sit at my desk and I open the front of the folder, the part that goes back to 2019. I look at the first invoice we ever received. It is from a small distributor in Kentucky. The unit price is on it. The date is on it. The signature is on it. Sophie's signature next to mine. We had both signed the receiving slip that day because it was the first one, and we had been excited. I look at that signature, and I think about what our father said at the kitchen table. And I do not know what to do with the feeling. It is not anger. It is not even sadness exactly. It is something quieter than that. It is the feeling of having been the one who kept the file. I am not the wronged sister in the way you might imagine. I do not feel like a winner. I do not feel like a victim. I feel like a person who finally stopped pretending that the change jar was being counted by someone else. Our father is doing better. He still watches baseball with the sound turned down. Sophie comes by on Sundays. I come by on Saturdays. We do not overlap by an arrangement neither of us has ever spoken out loud. He has not asked us to overlap. I think in some way he understands. He asked me once, in late summer, whether I missed her. I told him I missed the version of her I had thought I had. I told him I did not know if that version had ever really existed, or if I had built it the way I built the folder, one entry at a time, hoping the totals would add up. He nodded. He did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "Your mother kept receipts in an envelope by the toaster." I told him I knew. He said, "She told me once that the receipts were not for me. They were for her, so she would know." I have thought about that a lot in the month since. The folder was not for Sophie. It was not for Marcus. It was not for the forensic accountant or the state filing office or the suppliers in Indiana and North Carolina. The folder was for me, so I would know. So I would know what the count was. So I would know that 38 years of being the back office sister had not been a story I had made up. So I would know that the 18 cents had been real. So I would know that the kitchen table and the change jar and the physical therapy appointments and the pearl necklace and the casual reorganization of who was on which email had all been part of one long pattern that I had finally written down. If you are watching this and you have ever been the one who handled one side of the family while someone else handled the other, I want you to hear something. You are allowed to keep the file. You are allowed to know the count. You are not the difficult sister, or the petty sister, or the one who is making a thing out of nothing. You are the one who has been keeping the receipts in an envelope by the toaster, the way our mother did, the way her mother probably did, the way women in long lines of families have always done while everyone else told the stories. Keep the folder, keep the dates, keep the SKUs, keep the price quotes on yellow legal pads, keep the records of who really drove to the appointments. Keep the notes about what was said at the kitchen table, not because you will need them, although you might. Keep them so you will know. I do not know if Sophie and I will ever be all the way back to being sisters in the way we were as children. I am not sure children's sisterhood is something you can return to anyway. We are something else now. We are two adult women on opposite sides of a hospital bed, holding the hands of an old man who said one sentence about a piece of paper 60 years after he probably should have said it to his own brother. The viewer question I want to ask you tonight is this. If you have ever been the one who handled one side of the business, or one side of the family, or one side of the caregiving, while a co-owner or a co-sibling handled the other, did you ever hit a moment where you realized the paper trail you kept was the only one that existed? I would like to know. Tell me in the comments. Tell me where you were when you realized it. Tell me what you did next. Tell me whether you confronted them, or whether you closed the door, or whether you are still standing at the kitchen counter with a coffee mug going cold in your hand, trying to decide. I read the comments. I really do. And if stories like this remind you that blood does not excuse betrayal, subscribe to my channel for more stories. Because sometimes peace begins when the truth is finally spoken. I am Clara. The folder is on the second shelf. The kitchen table still has a wobble in one leg, and the count finally is right.